So let me introduce the first speaker. And the first speaker is obviously with the hat, thought leader, disruptive innovator, all at the same time. Senior SRE leader in Google, senior software engineer at Netflix, SVP of thoughts at Facebook, and obviously better than all of you because the speaker is on stage and you are down there. And this speaker, this thought leader, is going to spill some wisdom on you. On the other side, we have the official hip-tech translator. And he knows a lot of languages, but courses in even more languages. But most important, he knows how to translate the thought leadership gibberish. So, let's do this thing. Everybody's software must be releasable at absolutely any time. Time to market is the single most important metric, and it's super important if you want to crush your competition to be able to code something and see it in production immediately. Well, yes, there is a startup, there is a co-founder, and they love to drink, and they're completely drunk in 3 a.m. on Friday, and they had a bunch of crazy ideas. It's super important it will get to production in the same moment, right? That's what matters. Everyone should have 100% test automation. It's extremely important to automate the quality assurance because this is how we can move forward faster. Sure, we have this backend application written in Delphi in 1995. It's extremely important to automate the tests. It is released once in 2 years. Let's spend half a year automating its tests. Security is something that needs to be done continuously. Continuous security is extremely important to guarantee that our application is released faster and secure. Yeah, so this is how it works. We have an engineering organization of 1,000 people. 2 of them are security engineers. They basically run around and shout on everybody that everything is horrible. No one listens for them, but we know who to blame when we have a vulnerability. Your greater threat is outage, not the people. You hire the best people and then you trust them. Well, yes, and then they forget their prototypes in the bars, and then they leave their laptops with tens of thousands of customer credit card information in the car that got broken. People are not a threat at all. Virtual machines are the enemy of DevOps. This is where you must focus your innovation. Unless you embrace Kubernetes, you cannot do DevOps properly. Sure, our organization relies completely on virtualization, and everything works just fine. Now let's spend months and millions of dollars to refactor everything to containers just because people are happy with Kubernetes at the moment. You are beautiful and unique snowflake. So are your problems. No vendor could possibly understand them, because if they knew how to understand and solve your problems, they would work for you and not for the vendor. Yeah, no one ever solved a problem of dependency management in their life. So let's just reinvent the wheel every time we have any possible tiny problem because we think that we are so smart and smarter than everybody else. Our company is based in San Francisco because this is where the best engineers are. We cannot recruit this level of talent anywhere else in the world. Sure, let's take all the funding that we have and rent a tiny office in San Francisco for a tremendous amount of money, because what can possibly go wrong? Every horror movie is filmed in San Francisco, the earthquakes are there, everything is fine. So, this is all. That's my talk. And thank you very much. No, I'm just kidding. Well, yeah, this is me. My name is Baruch Sadogursky, and that's my official business card, and I'm the Chief Sticker Officer of JFrog. We have stickers of, for example, Daenerys Frogarian, but not only. We also have Frogfather and Super Frog and Wonder Frog and Spider Frog and many other types of frogs in characters and a lot of fun. We also have t-shirts of those. And obviously I prefer dealing with stickers than dealing with people, because when you deal with people, you hear a lot of bullshit like you just heard. I'm at JBaruch on Twitter. Let's see if that works. It should be somewhere. Here we go, almost here. I'm at JBaruch on Twitter, and as you already figured out, I'm an extremely entertaining guy, so you should follow me right now. If you're still not convinced, I conveniently have my Twitter handle on each and every slide. So whenever you decide, it's not too late. So, as I mentioned, our office is not in San Francisco, but it is in Silicon Valley, and in California, everybody are extremely sensitive. And I'm sensitive myself, and the thing that I'm sensitive about is that I'm not sensitive at all. So this is what is called a culture map, and this is from a book called The Culture Map, and I will mention in a second where you find it. But basically, if you take like the most horrible people, emotionally expansive and confrontational, this is where I am. I was born and raised in Russia, lived all my life in Israel, so basically this is me. If I still didn't offend anyone, that's on me, but I will make sure to fix it. Now, jokes aside, if I do offend anyone, I apologize in advance. No disrespect or offense intended, but please contact me and let me know, so next time I want to use this phrase, I will use some other offensive phrase instead. So yeah, this is the most important slide of this talk. I prepared a landing page for you at jfrog.com/show-notes. The slides are already there. The video is being filmed, I hope, if everything, I tap the right buttons by now, so I will post it hopefully tomorrow. All the links are there, including the link to the Culture Map book and everything else. A place to comment. This is where you tell me that I offended you. Ratings. The fact that I offended you shouldn't affect the ratings, obviously. And a small raffle for thank you for being here instead of drinking. You are not a lot of people. Chances are very high. Go there and participate. So that's the most important link, jfrog.com/show-note. It is as well on every slide if you forget. So let's talk about how we got to this situation when you come to a conference and you hear a lot of these smart things, and which might be appropriate to you, but also might be just bullshit, or might be very relevant for the companies that the speakers come from, right? Wherever they said about, this is how we do it in Google, maybe this is how they do it in Google, but maybe you are not Google. And to understand what happened, we need to go back in time, and yesterday was the Victory Day, the end of World War II. Let's go to the beginning of World War II, especially to this small area in the Pacific Islands, where there are a lot of small islands, and they're not like empty. People live there. It's just rather undeveloped and primitive tribes. And then the war starts, and the United States joined the war, and then something strange is happening on those islands. Almost overnight, a lot of ships come, and they start to build airfields and runways and structures, and the planes start coming, and they bring all kind of goods, all kind of crates, all kind of strange things, and the natives, they are a little bit confused. What's going on? How do they learn about what's going on? Well, they go to Hacker News, and they read about this new Kubernetes thing, or whatever it is, and try to understand what it is. And then they realize that, well, that's pretty simple. If we have a plane, there will be cargo. So they create planes. For some reason, cargo doesn't come. So by now I spoiled the answer, how that is called? The cargo cult. Now, the cargo cult, as we use it now to describe something that we do because everybody else does it, actually is a religious cult. It's a religious cult of cargo that should come if only we create enough planes. I kid you not. The link to the cargo cult is Jeffrey.com's show notes. So you'll go there and check it out. And we have the cargo cult as well. And all the opening of this talk was an example of such a cargo cult. Our cargo cult is mainly driven by hype around a certain class of technologies and companies that adopt those technologies, and I gave you some examples in the fictitious title, like Google and Netflix and Facebook, and it's not that they try to trick you, it's not that they lie to you, it's not that they praise themselves for something that they don't do. They actually have all those glorious things they tell you they have. It's just not always appropriate for your situation. When the Americans came with all the planes were real. It's just, that's not the development level that was right for those native people. And what I will try to answer in today's talk is how can we spot the cargo cult, and how can we battle it, and how can we make the right decisions on what appropriate to us, to our organization, and what's not. And the answer is in correctly answering 4 questions. Next time you're in the audience of a conference and you hear about the new buzz and you see a demo which blows your mind, that's the time to ask those questions. The first question is my organization ready to adopt new tech? And I think that's the most important one. And it's actually a question of maturity. Do I have the right tools? And do I have the right processes to be agile enough to adopt new and fancy technology? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not there yet, and this is fine as well, as long as we know where we are going and how to get there. The second question is it even a good technology? The fact that someone praises the technology from stage and shows you a demo that most of the time fails, because that's conference demos, but even if it works, still doesn't make this a good technology. So we need to assess, is this technology is good? And those two are kind of universal. We can always judge our organization if we're generally ready to adopt a new technology, and the answer if some technology is good or not is also can be given outside of the context. And then there are 2 additional questions which are extremely context dependent. What do I gain from adopting this tech? And I gain a new line in my resume, but as a team, as a project, what this project gains from adopting a new technology. Will our product be better if we adopt Kubernetes or what's not? And is tech is a good solution to my problem organizationally, right? And that's back to the example, let's rewrite all our virtualization to Kubernetes and containers just because it's a hype. Maybe, you know what, maybe your product will be better, but it will take you so long, you will lose the game to your competition just because you wanted to improve your product, not in appropriate time and not with appropriate measures. And those two questions I won't be able to answer because those two questions are extremely context dependent, and you should ask and answer them yourself. What we will try to do now is answering the first two. Is my organization and team ready to adopt new tech? And, you know, this unpopular opinion things going on Twitter that everybody hates? I'm going to do unpopular opinion. Martin Fowler was a very big advocate for maturity models. Maturity model is a tool that helps people assess the current effectiveness of a person or a group and supports figuring out what capabilities they need to occur next in order to improve their performance. And that's exactly the answer to the first question. Are we ready to adopt a new tech? In many circles, maturity models have gained a bad reputation, but although they can easily be misused, in proper hands, they can be helpful. And now I have an example of one of those many circles, and this is a very, very powerful example. So, I hope you all heard about the DevOps Research Institute research that they do about accelerating DevOps. They do this research every year. Nicole Forsgren and Jim King and Jez Humble, very influenced people, and recently they released the book about their research, which is called Accelerate. You know where to find the link. Jeffrey, it comes to the show notes. And this is what they say about maturity models. While maturity models are very popular in the industry, we cannot stress enough that maturity models are not an appropriate tool. They're going like, don't use them, they're horrible, they're just bad, and those people that we listen. And that's why I call my defense of maturity models an unpopular opinion, because I actually have to say that I had an experience with this talk when I submitted it to one of the DevOps days, and the organizer came back to me and say, you cannot do a talk about maturity models because the book Accelerate considers them harmful, so we won't let you to speak about this topic. So first of all, thank you organizers for letting me introduce my unpopular opinion, and I think that Nicole, Jez, and Jean obviously know what they're talking about, and I have to plug here our own user conference, Swamp Up, that is going to be in San Francisco soon in June, and for all of you, there's 20% off if you want to participate. Our keynote speaker is Nicole Forsgren, right? So obviously we have huge respect for her, and we think that she's super smart. So how can I defend something that she declared so harmful? And I think that there is something in their statement that maturity models are bad, but it's bad maturity models that are bad. If you implement maturity models correctly, they are not conflicting with any criticism that they provide. So let's say why they say the maturity models are bad. So first of all, there is a way to implement maturity model when you put a goal. And you say, I want to be here. I want to release this fast. I want to have this coverage. I want to have those processes. Now, this is bad because improvement is a continuous process. You cannot put a goal and stop where you get there. Instead, it should be a process that you always go forward, and when you achieve a level, there is a next level there waiting for you. Another thing not to do is not to copy-paste the maturity model from the internet. So this is why I don't have an example of maturity model in jeffro.com/show-notes, because this is not how you do it. Instead, I will show you how to do it. It's one size does not fit all, and you will have to figure it out yourself. Checkboxes for tools, that's another way to implement maturity model. Are we using Kubernetes? Yes, we're level 3. Not really. Instead, we need to focus on the outcomes of those tools. So if, for example, Kubernetes allows us to scale our microservices, what we need to measure is our ability to scale microservices, and not do we have Kubernetes in production or not. And, of course, the maturity model cannot be write once and forget, because if that was the case, probably we will be measured about how well we implement waterfall methodology. Obviously, maturity models have to be evolving constantly. Now, if you do all this right, if you concentrate, if you do process, if you focus on outcomes, if you know that there is no copy-paste from other company and you need to pay constant attention to it, then I don't see how a maturity model actually conflicts with what Nicole, Jean, and Kim are talking about. So with that, let's talk about how you implement a good maturity model. So there are a number of components in maturity models. First of all, it's evaluation factors. You, in the end of the day, need to put a number on something that you have. So you need to understand what you want to measure. Scoring methodology, what good looks like, what bad looks like, and what partial looks like. Self-assessment versus third-party assessment capability. This is a capability. This doesn't come out of the box. You need to be able to find this third party that will look at what you did and say, you flatter yourself. You're not here. You're way behind. That can be external consultants. That can be another team in your organization. There are ways, but you need this third-party assessment capability. Progress tracking, obviously you want to see your progress, so you need to be able to track it over time. Visualization, this is extremely important. In the end of the day, you need to be able to come to any level of measurement, show them one picture, and say, this is how we are doing. And I'll show you an example of such a visualization. Now, I'm going to use a very, very complicated tool that, me personally, I'm very far away from mastering it, and I have to say that I suspect that the majority of you won't be able to master it your entire career, and that's obviously Microsoft Excel. All the examples here are in Microsoft Excel just because it's good enough. There are some custom tools for implementing maturity models. Excuse me, but I call bullshit. Google Spreadsheets, Microsoft Excel, or OpenOffice, God forbid, they all do the same job. You can write tables and you can make charts out of those tables. This is all you need. So, as I mentioned, in the end of the day, you need to come to your boss and show this. This is a maturity model, and look, there are two dots, initial and updated. Initial is where we think we are. And the scales here are tools and processes. We think that we are okay on both. And the yellow dot here is the third-party assessment. So either someone from the other team or external consultant can look at our model and say, you know what, you're flattering yourself. You are not as good. And the gap between the two is also very, very suggestive. Why do we have this gap? Why do you think that we are better than we are? Over time, as we mentioned, progress planning, this is where we are now. This is where we want to be in Q2, I don't know, next year. This is when we want to be. Next time, we will reevaluate our maturity model. You remember? It's continuous improvement. So this target is not when we stay and we declare ourselves perfect organization, but this is the target that we reach before we move forward. What is going to happen is that we will shift the entire maturity model. This target will become something in the middle, and we will have more space to grow after we get there. So this is progress buying. Leaderboard, obviously, healthy competition is very important. Team B is for Baruch, obviously, I'm with those guys, you understand. But yeah, it's very important to see where you can go, and especially when we are talking about your colleagues, that you can go and sit with them and say, whoa guys, how did you do it? What did you implement? How did you integrated whatever magic you did? And now the question is, okay, what are those dots? Where do they come from? Is it like dart drawing that, whenever I hit, I can point whatever and the same thing, I'm there? How do we calculate those dots on this plot? And the answer is we have, obviously, to break it down. And the first level of breaking it down is by big categories, and we will obviously break it down further. And you can see the categories here, and the categories are basically what you want to achieve in terms of best practices of development, right? So continuous integration, infrastructure as code, what else is there? Service interaction, and etc., etc. And then you have three different benchmarks, three different columns of rating. The one is benchmark. Benchmark is where we want to be in this current iteration. Sometimes it's 100%, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes 90% is good enough. We actually don't need to go the extra mile. And I will give you an example when we are going to talk about evaluation factors, when we can actually say, 90% is good enough. But there are some that have to be 100%. The other is today, where we are standing today, and that's a self-evaluation and third-party evaluation, and you can see here what's happening. And then this target. You remember this target, which is not, again, I cannot force this enough, that's not where we retire because everything is perfect. This is where we want to be, and then we will start all over again. So the target here is sometimes the benchmark, but sometimes not. If we want to get 90% of continuous integration, we have some back office application that someone builds on their computer once in 2 years, and we don't want to invest in its automation, that's fine. This is why it's 90 and not 100. But actually, in the time frame that we allocate ourselves, we know that there is another application that should be built automatically, but it's not. So and we won't be able to get to it. This is why it's 86. Here's an interesting example of very interesting numbers, the FedRAMP elements, and that's like the government regulation that I need to have in place in order to sell for the government. So benchmark is 100%, because if I lack anything, it's like I don't have anything, right? Because it has to be perfect. We didn't even start it, and we're not going to touch it. We're not going to touch it because the criticality is defined as nice to have. And this criticality comes, we're going to talk about from different decision makers in our organization. In this case, it's probably the sales that said, you know what, it's a huge investment on your part, we don't have the bandwidth to sell to the government right now anyway, so forget about it. In order to implement it, you have to have everything. Now you don't have anything, and leave it this way. Right? So you see, there is a lot of flexibility, and not always 100% in benchmark and 100% in market is the target. Now, the next question is, okay, we have interesting numbers there. So we have stuff like 83. What is 83? 83 of what? How do we decide where it comes from? And here, obviously, we need to break it another layer down. And this is a breakdown which is very, very detailed and gives you the exact number. Right? So here's an example. DevOps, the category on-demand releases. We are talking about the access of tools, and we see here the requirement. Builds are configured to publish and consume artifacts from artifact management system in a consumable format. What we actually say here is we need a tool that knows how to manage how to manage our artifacts. And here we have very detailed requirements. Artifacts are published in a way where the immediate artifacts can be agent managed and the final artifacts are preserved within required policy guidelines. And then you answer yes, no, that's one way, or complete, partial, incomplete, etc., etc. Now, this information can then be converted, evaluated in numbers, and converted to a number in a category, and eventually plotted in this chart that I showed to my manager to show where I am. And here is another example. This is from process, same area. They pay me money to put this example and not others. Build artifacts are released. Customers are managed and governed. So you can see here, releasing software to product is integrated into continuous delivery process. I don't know where all the spaces went. Following all the applicable IT governance requirements, right? So we have a system, we have an artifact management, which is compliant with some requirements that we set. But all of it, both the tool and the process, this is what JFrog does. We are in artifact management, have different tools around it, and you should check us out, jfrog.com. You'll be there anyway for the show notes. Stop by. Now, back to the question where the nice to have came from. Do you remember this nice to have on FedRAMP? Someone decided that this is not our top priority. And we have different forces inside our organization that might have different opinions about stuff, right? So for example, we see here engineering perspective, ops perspective, and company perspective. Now that sounds like silos, but they are not. That's the opposite of silos. This is where we come together and discuss each and every requirement from different perspectives. And we might have different opinions about stuff and also might have different criticality. So for some requirements, the ops perspective would be not relevant. I don't know which dependency management or dependency injection framework to use inside our products. There is nothing from the ops perspective that dictates that. And there is nothing in the business perspective that dictates that. The business couldn't care less whether you're using Java, let's say Spring or Juice or whatever. But the developers are passionate about it, and they will say, okay, that's important for us. We will have here must have when others refrain. Sometimes we have conflicts, and this is what DevOps is about. We figure them out, and we assign priorities. Another aspect that I promised you to talk about is how do we define criticality? And that's something very important as well, right? So here's an example, system configuration as code. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different levels from 0 to 6 that define how well our system is implemented. Differentiating, infrastructure operates without any manual process. All changes of infrastructure are done through automation and policy only. That's 100%. And then complete. Infrastructure operates without any manual process. Some infrequent administrative abilities might be initiated manually, although the activities themselves must be automated. Sorry. Now, if you ask the organization, they say, well, it's nice to have everything automated, but if some infrequent operations have to be started manually, that's good enough. And this is where we can have a benchmark, which is not at 100%, but at 90%, and this is, or 83, and this is good enough. And so forth, all the way to no support. While some functions might be automated, they are generally kicked off manually, and many functions are still fully manual. Large backlog of automation items, that's no support, and that's bad. So this is my example of how a maturity model might look like. It might look completely different, and that's up to you. But I hope you realized how you can build a relatively simple system to evaluate yourself in this huge universe of tools and processes and know where you are standing. couple of do's and don'ts that we can speak about. So this is very important. Use primary colors. Green is good and red is bad, right? So that's first tip. Involve your team in model definition. Now you saw it. Model definition can be very tedious. You break it to relatively tiny requirements of the processes and tools, and obviously not only that's a lot of work, but also the definitions are something a little bit in the eye of the beholder. So if you involve the team that need to assess themselves in the writing of those definitions, obviously it's easier because a lot of people are doing it, but also there is a good place to express what they think about the requirements of those of those particular lines. Self-assessment and external assessment, this is also very important, and we spoke about it, and the gap that can be realized first, and then we can talk about what to do with it. I spoke about that as well. If there are teams that are forward-looking, that are advanced in your organization, they will be very happy to adopt because they will obviously be ranked very, very high, and it feels good for everybody, and then the rest follow. And 100% is not the goal, because there are stretch goals that we can say, okay, it's nice to have, but it's not mandatory, and evolve the model from time to time. Going back to the difference between good maturity models and bad maturity models, they cannot stay unchanged. They need to be involved. And the whole idea of having a maturity model is not for fun. It's not for tapping ourselves on the back and say, here, look at how high we are. It's the realization that if we are here, there is a process before we can get to a higher level. And this goes back to the cargo cult and our ability to implement changes, to adapt new tech, to be able to implement for our profit what we heard in the next conference from speaker from Netflix or Google. So this is a little bit lengthy answer to the first question, and I promised you the answer to the second one as well. Is it a really good tech? And there are companies that make a lot of money answering this question, right? All the analysts of the technological world, this is what they make their profit from. They assess technologies, they compare technologies, and they do something like that. And that's obviously Gartner Magic Quadrant that I'm sure that almost all of you are familiar with. And basically the way it works is that we have here two axes. This is the ability to execute, and that means have money. And this is completeness of vision, and that means have good ideas. Obviously, if you have good ideas and have money, you will be here. And those are the leaders. If you have money but have no ideas, you are the challengers. And if you have great ideas and have no money, you are visionary. And if you have no money and no good ideas, this is the shitty tech area, correctly called, and they call it niche players, but it's basically no money, no ideas. And this is Gartner and other companies differentiate themselves in this analysis to the extent that Gartner cannot sue them for copy pasting. So this is the Forrestal wave, and it's exactly the same, right? So you have current offering, how much money we can make out of what we have now, and then strategy, that's basically the ideas, and if you have money and ideas, you will be here, and if you, otherwise you will be here, right? So that's exactly the same idea, just looking differently. Another interesting view, and I probably offended tons of vendors by showing that. That's not me. That's Gardner and Forrestal offending you. I'm just presenting you the graphs. Another interesting way to understand what technology is looking at something that is called the Forrester hype cycle. And again, I bet you at least heard about it or heard the names. The technology trigger peak of inflated expectations. Everybody are, could be like this, could be like this. And then throw of disillusionment. Oh, dude, this is hard. And then like slope of enlightenment. You know what, I actually can work with that. And then the plateau of productivity. Well, it actually works well for me, and I'm productive here. And some technologies die in the middle. So this is extremely old. I think that's here. It's 2010. It's almost 10 years ago. And it's fascinating to see what actually happened. So microblogging, that's Twitter. It was like thorough disillusionment. So now I guess it's here by now. And there are some technologies that died and never, died in some point. So broadband over power lines. Remember this idea? I actually sold my power line adapters somewhere in this time when they died, so yeah. It's amazingly correct for every technology, and it's fascinating to evaluate where the technologies you hear about are. This is all great. There is one problem with all those analysts. They are pay to play. If you are not a customer of those analysts, they won't assess you. They won't even put you in the shitty companies. The other way around. You need to be a customer to have a chance to be put with the shitty companies. But that's not the only way. One of the most powerful resources that I know to assess a technology, it's what's called the ThoughtWorks technology radar. ThoughtWorks are one of the most influential consulting companies in the IT world, and they publish every couple of months, I think every quarter, the technology radar. And the technology radar looks like that. That's why it's called radar, because it's kind of boop, 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 boop. And they have 4 different areas: techniques, tools, languages, and frameworks. And this is where you can check what is going on. So, you know what? We don't have any time and we should go drinking, but instead, let's look at technology radar. That's more fun. That's, by the way, you don't say it. Okay, how about now? Okay, that's your show notes, by the way, but that's not what I wanted. Here, technology radar. Let's enlarge it a little bit. That's volume 20. I think it's out maybe a week ago or something like that. That's pretty fresh. And we can see how it looks. So let's go to, tools. So tools will be a quarter of a radar going from the hottest. Hottest, it's like adopt right now. It's in the middle of the radar. To, and then trial. Well, you should try it in your system. Assess. Go hear about it at a conference, read a blog post. Or the coldest one is hold. If you use it, okay, but if you consider it, don't. Okay, so it goes from the hottest to the don't touch it. And let's see what we have here in don't touch it. 67, handwritten cloud formation. Well, you really shouldn't do that. It makes sense. There is a search here. So we can search for, you know what, you tell me. What do you want to search? Okay. Let's see what I have. All, not only recent. Search. No, it's not found. At least they don't call us shitty. Thank you. Other ideas? Huh? Lambda. Oh, all right. Here we go. AWS Lambda. That's what you wanted. Okay, here we go. As of March 2017, it's in trial. Let's start from the beginning. November 2015, trial. Well, you should start playing with it. The last assessment was March 2017, still trial. I would say reasonably enough. Well, a lot of industry plays with it, but I cannot say that the serverless industry is as mature as adopt now for everybody. Does it make sense? Anything else? No? You got the idea? Kubernetes? We didn't search for Kubernetes. That's a mistake. Okay, Kubernetes. Where is it? Here. Okay, adopt. Well, yeah, makes sense. November 15 assess. Take a look at it. It was like 0.0.0 beta, don't touch. And then it went to trial, April 16, and it went to adopt November 17. Well, again, makes sense, I guess, right? Okay, so I have like 2 more slides. Yeah, so that's the technology radar. We searched for JFrog, we didn't find it, and I know, and you know, that JFrog should be in adopt, obviously, and especially in your organization. And then you wonder, okay, I want to build my own, because I have some set of technologies and opinions that might or might not be as ThoughtWorks, and I want to share with my organization my views on what's going on. And what ThoughtWorks recommends is having 2 others. One for yourself personally. This is your personal guide to your professional growth. You put the stuff that you want to play with, you want to trial, you want to assess, and this is very, very easy to track how tools are moving through your learning curve, but also having one for your organization, so you will have a common vocabulary and common agreement on set of tools, techniques, platform languages, and what's not that are used in your organization. Actually, having your own radar is another representation of your maturity model. Everything came together. That's super cool. And the way that you do it is you basically go to the link that you have in the show notes, and they explain you how to get started. I'll give you a hint. When you create your own radar, you use the same powerful tool that I already mentioned. Actually put everything in Excel table, and they will chart the radar for you. And with that, just to recap, the 4 questions that help you battle the cargo code are: is my organization ready to adopt a new tech? Is it even a good tech? What do my product gain from this tech? And if it's the right time for my organization to adopt it. And with that, thank you very much. Reminder, show notes, jeffrog.com show notes. I'm at jbaruch on Twitter. If you still don't for any reason, now it will be a good time. When you followed me and now go praise on Twitter, don't forget the Nashville DevOps hashtag and DevOps Days hashtag, and 20% off on SwampUp. The link is in the show notes.